What if I told you one of the most powerful passages about peace in the entire Bible is only 3 verses long? And because this chapter is only 3 verses long, it's easy to miss and easy to overlook. But hidden in Psalm 131 is a beautiful lesson about trust, humility, contentment, and resting in God. We live in a world that consistently, constantly demands answers, wants certainty and control. And then we read Psalm 131, and it invites us to do something different. It invites us to trust. Today, we're continuing our Hidden Gems of the Bible series by going through one of the shortest Psalms in Scripture, and one of the most profound at the same time. Let's begin by reading the entire Psalm first, and then we'll break down each verse. Psalm 131 is a simple trust in the Lord, a song of ascents by David. Starting in verse 1, Lord, my heart is not haughty, nor my eyes lofty. Neither do I concern myself with great matters, nor with things too profound for me. Surely I have calmed and quieted my soul, like a weaned child with his mother, like a weaned child is my soul within me. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time forth and forever. Well, let's start with the introduction. It says, a simple trust in the Lord, a song of ascents of David. So Psalm 131 is a song of ascents. Now these were songs that were sung by the people who were traveling to Jerusalem for worship. Imagine groups of people, they're walking together, they're all going to the city of God. They're singing these words as they approach the city. And among all the songs that they could have sung, David gives us this one here. This is a song about humility, contentment, and trust. And these are the things, honestly, that is what worship requires. I want to go through each of these short verses together. Let's start in verse 1. David says, Lord, my heart is not haughty, nor my eyes lofty. So David begins with the heart, because that's where pride starts. That's where it begins. The word haughty speaks of arrogance, self-importance, and having an inflated view of oneself. So basically, what David is saying is, Lord, I am not trying to make myself bigger than I am. And when he talks about his eyes, saying, nor my eyes lofty, he's equating his eyes and the heart together. Why? Because the eyes often reveal what's actually happening in the heart. Lofty eyes are eyes that look down on others, and lofty eyes are part of someone who is consumed with pride and convinced that they know better than everyone else. And David is absolutely rejecting that attitude. He says, I do not have either of these things. But then he goes deeper and he says, neither do I concern myself with great matters, nor with things too profound for me. These words are really amazing to me because David's not saying that learning is wrong, or that being curious or having curiosity or wanting or having wisdom is wrong. Remember, David was a king. He dealt with things all day long, every day, significant issues he had on his plate. So he's not condemning these things. Instead, he's acknowledging something that we often struggle to admit. There are things that only God understands. There are questions that we cannot and will not ever be able to answer. There are mysteries that we'll never be able to solve, and there are circumstances that we cannot control. We are not going to always know what God is up to. And honestly, to me, I think that's probably the best thing. He's God. There's a reason why he's God, and there's a reason why we're not God. So essentially, David is saying, I've stopped trying to carry what belongs to God. So how do we apply this to our own lives today? Well, think about these next few questions that I'm going to ask. How many sleepless nights have you had trying to understand something that God has not revealed? What about anxiety? How much anxiety comes when you are demanding answers that we just don't have and that may never come? How much stress comes from trying to control outcomes that we cannot control? I think we've all struggled with this. Think about what David says in verse 1. He says, I don't concern myself with things too profound for me. That's not David being ignorant or not wanting to know. That's him humbling himself before God. He is recognizing the difference between God's responsibilities and his own responsibilities, and we should do the same. There's tremendous freedom in letting God do what God does best and not trying to take things from God and to control them ourselves. Now I want to go through verse 2, and this is a really beautiful image of how David feels as a result of humbling himself before God. He says, starting in verse 2, "Surely I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with his mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me."
The very first line, "Surely I have calmed and quieted my soul." So notice, David doesn't say, "God calmed my soul." Although God certainly helps us and he's always there for us, David says, "I have calmed my soul and quieted my soul." What does this tell us? Well, it tells us the fact that David calmed and quieted his soul, it required intentional surrender, intentional trust and rest. He gives us the picture of this when he says, like a weaned child with his mother. So this is not an infant crying out for milk. This is a weaned child who has learned something. Child's no longer coming to his mother because of what she provides for him. The child's resting in the presence of his mother. The child is content, he's secure, he's safe, he's comfortable, and the child has trust for the mother. So basically, David's saying, God, my soul's like that. My soul's like the weaned child. It's a beautiful image. David is saying, I am resting in God, not because I understand everything, but because I trust in him. Let me say it this way. There's a difference between peace and having answers, and many of us believe that peace comes from getting answers. But Psalm 131 teaches us something different. Peace comes from trusting the one who has the answers. That's a completely different way of living altogether. The world says, if I can understand everything, I'll just have peace. But David says, if I trust God, I can have peace even when I don't understand. That changes everything. And finally, let's look at verse 3. Because the psalm ends with a simple invitation. David says, O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time forth and forever. So David moves from his own personal testimony to publicly encouraging others to do the same. What he has learned, he's now sharing with everyone else. Hope in the Lord, not in circumstances, not in outcomes, not in people, not in your own understanding. Hope in the Lord. Why? Because God is trustworthy. He's faithful. He knows what we don't know and he sees what we cannot see. And because God understands what we cannot understand. So, how does all this relate to our lives? One of the reasons why I love Psalm 131 is because it actually speaks directly to us. We live in a culture that demands instant answers. Everybody's all about instant gratification. We want to know, why did this happen? What's next? How's this going to work out? What does the future hold? And many times, God doesn't answer those questions immediately. Instead, what he does, he invites us to trust him. Psalm 131 is a reminder that maturity is not knowing everything. It's trusting God when we don't know everything. You know, Psalm 131 may only be 3 verses long, but hidden within those 3 verses is a very powerful lesson for us. We must have humility instead of pride. We must trust in God instead of wanting control. We must be content with where we are instead of being anxious about it, and we must have hope instead of fear. David discovered something that many of us spend a lifetime learning. Peace is not found in having all the answers. Peace is found in resting in the presence of God. Just like a weaned child with his mother, safe, secure, content, comfortable, trusting. And maybe that's why this psalm is one of the greatest hidden gems in the Bible. If this study encouraged you, be sure to like it and subscribe to my channel and join me for the next hidden gem of the Bible. Have a blessed day.